Let's talk about emotional labor. Emotional labor is when you have to display certain emotions in order to meet the requirements of your job. Most often is associated with service jobs, where you are expected to be bubbly or enthusiastic when you are interacting with customers. The archetypical example is probably being a waiter or waitress, where you are expected to smile and to laugh at people's jokes, despite the reality of your own feelings. One place where emotional labor is distressingly forgotten about is in leadership. When you are acting as a leader, you are responsible for the emotions that you display to the team, because your position means that the emotions that you display are going to have a massive impact upon the emotional well-being and productivity and engagement of the rest of the team. In the case of service level jobs, often this emotional labor is cooked into the job description. When you are waiting tables, you are expected to have a smile on your face. When you greet a customer, you have to do it with a little wave. In other cases, the emotional labor is very tightly coupled to your moment-to-moment remuneration. If I am a salesperson, my ability to do emotional labor is going to be directly correlated to my ability to be a good salesperson. If I am being grumpy when I'm trying to sell this photocopier, it's going to be a lot harder for me to sell that photocopier. But in the case of leadership, often that expectation of emotional labor is implicit as opposed to explicit. And while it may affect your compensation long term, because being unable to do it is going to prevent you from being a fully effective leader, in the moment-to-moment experience, it can be largely ignored. And unfortunately, this is what you see with a lot of leaders. While the leaders should be responsible for the emotions they display to their team in order to help manage the team through that emotional display, what often happens is in fact the opposite. You end up with leaders who are very emotional, who have very little emotional regulation, who are not performing any emotional labor whatsoever. And the impact of that is that the team often becomes very emotional as well. And you end up with other members on the team, people who aren't necessarily in the leadership roles, having to do this emotional labor to cover for this leader. Indeed, they may be doing things in order to try to regulate the emotions of the leader themselves. The best piece of advice Ray Musica ever gave me was to say, get angry on purpose. What he is saying there is to use your emotional displays as tools. Use them to get the team to do what you need them to do. And this extends beyond simply anger. If we are happy, if we are enthusiastic, if we are sad, if we are disengaged, all of these emotional displays, including ones that are very flat and neutral, are going to be picked up by the team and interpreted through the lens of information that they have. So if you are acting very unenthusiastic at a team meeting where a bunch of work is being displayed, the team is likely to pick up on that and think, oh, maybe what we did wasn't very good. And the consequence of that might be that the team actually falls into a funk and actually slows down. So even if you actually aren't very enthusiastic, often the right thing to do is to show that enthusiasm, show that appreciation to the team to try to increase their engagement in what's going on. And of course, sometimes you have externalities affecting your emotional state. Maybe your dog just died before the team meeting, and it has nothing to do with what the team is displaying. And while in the case of leadership, you may have the opportunity to share more of what's going on and explain your emotional state in a way that a waiter can't really do, even in that case, sometimes you simply have to perform the emotional labor to display the emotion that is needed in that moment, in that interaction, in order to keep the team doing what you need them to be doing. If you aren't doing this, then either the team is going to be this emotional maelstrom as your emotions are bouncing off of other emotions and everything gets super heightened, or you are going to be offloading this labor onto other parts of your team. And in addition to trying to regulate the emotion of the greater team, those people are going to be trying to regulate your emotions to a large degree as well. And they can't do it as effectively as you can because your presence to the team is going to be much more public than theirs. So it is necessary that you are being aware of your emotional presentation to the larger organization, especially to your team, because it is going to impact the project that you are theoretically supposed to be leading. Unfortunately, too often, this is something that leaders don't do. Sometimes it's because they were never told they were supposed to do it. Sometimes it's because of ego and they feel that their position gives them the right to do and act in whatever way they want. But the way they act, the things they do, obviously impact the overall team health, the overall team's cohesion, and the way that the project is going to come together. So a leader who is not able or not willing to do emotional labor is going to end up, in the long term, being an ineffective leader. Sometimes their emotions are going to be perfectly aligned with what is needed with the situation that is going on. And in that case, everything is fine. But a lot of times, they're not. And their emotions are going to drive the project in a lot of random ways. When you see a project that feels like it's swerving across the road, swinging from extreme to extreme, sometimes this isn't actually a failure of design. Sometimes this isn't a failure of planning. Sometimes what this simply is a leader who has an inability to perform emotional labor, allowing their own emotions to swing the project around relatively randomly. To some degree, you could argue that all jobs require a certain degree of emotional labor. If you drive up to any job and your car got smashed in, and so you're angry, and you start yelling at everyone at your job site, that's not really good for the health of anyone's job. But emotional labor takes it beyond that, beyond the expectation of having some degree of emotional self-regulation, the ability to at least not act out, and moves it beyond that into asking you to display emotions that are different than the ones you actually have. So it's not about just being able to keep a lid on it. It's also about being able to show different emotions when you need to. And if you have a job that doesn't require any emotional labor, you might be thinking, that sounds exhausting. And yeah, it can be exhausting. It's another thing upon your plate of things you have to deal with. And I would argue for myself, one of the things that eroded the edges between the job and the not job part of my life is probably the emotional labor part of the job. Because when you are working as a programmer or when you are doing a PowerPoint presentation, when you go home or you walk away from your desk, you might still be thinking about that, but it's engaging with a different part of your brain than the part of your brain that is now engaging with the rest of your life. But when you are having to very intensely control your emotions throughout your job, and it's going to impact your ability to do those sorts of things outside of your job. And we all perform a certain amount of emotional labor just to live in a society. There's a certain amount of expectation of reaction to certain things that may not match what is actually going on inside ourselves. Indeed, as I say this, I wonder if, as a society, we have lost some of our ability to perform this emotional labor, and everyone's maybe a little bit too willing to just expose whatever they're feeling to the rest of the world, regardless of what is appropriate to the situation in that moment. And certainly, suppressing our emotions can be damaging to our psychological health. But there are situations where that is what is called for. So you need to ensure that you still have outlets so that you are able to maintain your own emotional health even while you are trying to manage the emotional health of the team that you are leading. So how good am I at this? I would say overall that I feel most emotions at a pretty muted level. So that is helpful when what I need to do from an emotional labor perspective is simply to not show that I am angry or disappointed with what I am seeing. But I think that mutedness of my emotions also makes it very difficult for me to show enthusiasm or gratitude when that is what is called for. So I've had arguably on the don't show the negative things to the team except when it is appropriate. I'm actually gotten pretty good at that. Ray's advice has served me incredibly well. On the flip side of that, show super positive emotions to the team when that is what is needed. I would say there's still room for improvement there. The exact degree or emotion that each situation called for has a lot of different correct answers. Some leaders are incredibly enthusiastic and incredibly boisterous and celebrate really loudly, but then also express disappointment very loudly. And that can work really well. It can be very loud, very, very emotional. And if done intentional, that can really work. For me, my style has always been to pull it a bit more towards the middle. It doesn't give you as big of highs, but it also avoids some of the bigger lows that are potentially there as well. You can dial this into your own style, but the thing to remember is that if you are a leader, this is part of the job. If you aren't doing this, you are not going to be able to lead fully effectively. So if the concept of performing any degree of emotional labor seems like something you are simply incapable of even engaging with it, then leadership may not be the path for you. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you are interested in becoming a member, there's a link to that down in the description. We also have a Patreon if you are more interested in supporting the channel in that way. Both patrons and channel members get access to our Discord, so if you're interested in interacting with the channel to a deeper level, that's an effective way to do so. The higher tiers of membership also get early access to our videos, so you could have seen this video weeks ago if you were a member. Do you have to perform emotional labor in your job? What's some good advice you've gotten about emotional labor, and how has it changed the way you interact with the parts of your job that require it? Share your tips and tricks in the comments because I'm sure we could all use them. And I'll see you again soon. Thank you.